At 80, I realized that everyone around me is not trustworthy. As I sit here at 80, reflecting on a life filled with both joy and heartbreak, one truth has become unshakable in my mind. Not everyone around me is trustworthy. It's a realization that took me decades to fully grasp, and one that I wish I had understood sooner. Throughout my years of living, I've experienced the highs and lows of relationships, friendships that bloomed then withered, family bonds that were tested, and romantic love that soared only to sometimes falter. Trust, I've come to see, is fragile and far more complex than I ever imagined. When we are young, we trust freely. We assume the best in people, seeing only their potential and their promises. But as the years go by, we learn that trust is something that must be carefully guarded, something to be earned. The lesson is bittersweet. While trust can be the foundation of our most meaningful relationships, it can also be broken, sometimes beyond repair. 1. The innocence of youth and blind trust. In our youth, trust is often given without a second thought. There's an innocence that comes with being young, a belief that people are inherently good, that they will keep their promises, and that loyalty is a given. In my 20s and 30s, trust came naturally. I quickly made friends, developed close bonds with colleagues, and entered relationships without hesitation. My world was filled with shared dreams, laughter, and a deep sense of connection. The thought that anyone close to me might break that trust rarely crossed my mind. Looking back, I can see the naivete in that perspective. When you're young, life has yet to test you in the ways it will. You haven't yet experienced the betrayals or the quiet disappointments that accumulate over time. Trust at that age feels unshakable because you've yet to see how easily it can fracture. It wasn't until my 40s that I began to truly understand how fragile trust can be. A close friend, someone I'd confided in for years, shared one of my deepest secrets. She didn't mean to harm me, but her thoughtlessness shattered the bond we had built. It was a small act, but its impact was profound. I began to realize that trust is not something to be given lightly. Even people with good intentions can let us down, often in ways we don't see coming. This awakening was painful, but it also marked the beginning of a new understanding. Trust isn't an automatic right. It is something that must be earned through actions, consistency, and respect. 2. The weight of betrayal. Betrayal is one of life's hardest lessons, and it comes in many forms. Sometimes it's obvious: a spouse's infidelity, a friend's deliberate deception, a family member's abandonment. But more often, betrayal creeps in quietly, like a shadow passing over a once bright relationship. It's the friend who drifts away when life becomes difficult, the sibling who speaks behind your back, or the colleague who takes credit for your hard work. Betrayal can leave a scar that, even with time, never fully fades. One of the deepest betrayals I experienced was from a friend who I considered to be like family. We had shared our lives for over 20 years: holidays, family gatherings, celebrations. She had been there for me in difficult times, and I had been there for her. I trusted her implicitly, never doubting her loyalty. But slowly, over the years, I began to notice small betrayals, little lies, small instances of manipulation. At first, I ignored them, unwilling to believe that someone I cared for so deeply could be so careless with my trust. When her true intentions came to light, when I learned that she had used my vulnerabilities against me in conversations with others, the sense of betrayal was overwhelming. It wasn't just the loss of the friendship that hurt. It was the realization that I had been blind to the cracks in our relationship for so long. I had given my trust freely, without question, and it had been broken. In my later years, I've come to understand that betrayal is an inevitable part of life. It doesn't mean that we should stop trusting altogether, but it does mean that we should be more careful about where we place our trust. People, even those we love, are fallible. They have their own fears, insecurities, and desires, and sometimes those things lead them to hurt us, whether they mean to or not. 3. The role of boundaries in protecting trust. As I've grown older, one of the most important lessons I've learned is the importance of boundaries in protecting trust. When we are young, we often give too much of ourselves, believing that the more we give, the more secure our relationships will become. But as time passes, we start to realize that without clear boundaries, we leave ourselves vulnerable to being taken advantage of, to being hurt repeatedly by those who may not value our trust as we do. For much of my life, I was a giver. I prided myself on being there for others, friends, family, even acquaintances. If someone needed help, I was the first to offer it. If someone needed a shoulder to cry on, I made myself available, no matter how it affected my own well-being. But as the years went by, I began to see the toll this took on me. My trust, my generosity, was often met with expectations. People began to assume that I would always be there, always giving without asking for anything in return. And slowly, I realized that I had allowed my boundaries to blur to the point where I was no longer protecting myself. Setting boundaries is not about closing yourself off from others. It's about defining what is acceptable and what is not. It's about making sure that the trust we give is respected, that our emotional and physical well-being is protected. Boundaries are not walls. They are the guidelines that allow us to maintain healthy relationships while ensuring that we do not lose ourselves in the process. In my 80 years, I have learned that the relationships that last, the ones that are built on mutual trust and respect, are those where boundaries are clear and respected. People who truly care for us will honor our boundaries, not push against them. 4. Family. The most complicated trust. Trust within the family can be one of the most complex and painful aspects of life. We are raised to believe that family is the one place where trust should be absolute. We expect loyalty, support, and unconditional love from those who share our blood. But as the years go by, we begin to realize that family, like any other relationship, is made up of individuals, each with their own desires, insecurities, and flaws. And sometimes, even family can let us down in ways that are deeply hurtful. Growing up, I believed that my family bonds were unbreakable. My parents, my siblings, my extended family, they were the people I trusted without question. I believed that no matter what happened, family would always be there for me, that our ties were sacred. But as time passed, I began to see that even within family, trust can be broken. I've seen families torn apart by inheritance disputes, by jealousy, by old grudges that never fade. I've seen siblings who once swore loyalty to each other become estranged, and children who neglect their aging parents. One of the most painful lessons I've learned is that family does not automatically guarantee trust. In fact, some of the deepest betrayals I've experienced have come from within my own family. But I've also learned that trust within a family can be rebuilt, though it takes time, effort, and a willingness to forgive. At 80, I've come to accept that family is complicated. We love each other, but we are also flawed. Trust, even within family, must be nurtured and maintained. And sometimes, for our own well being, we must set boundaries even with those we love the most. 5. Trust and aging, a new perspective. Aging brings with it a new perspective on trust. When I was younger, I placed enormous weight on the trust I had in others. My sense of security, happiness, and even self worth often felt tied to the people around me, whether they were friends, family, or romantic partners. I believed that trust was something I needed from others to feel whole. But as I've grown older, I've learned that trust, like many things, changes with time. In my 80s, I no longer feel the need to place my trust in everyone I meet, nor do I feel the obligation to maintain relationships that no longer serve me. I've learned that trust is something that starts with me. I have to trust my own instincts, my own judgment, and my own ability to navigate life's complexities. Trusting myself has been one of the greatest gifts aging has given me. I've also come to see that broken trust is not a reflection of my own failures. When someone breaks our trust, it's easy to internalize it, to wonder what we did wrong, to question our own worth. But over the years, I've learned that betrayal is a part of life, and it often says more about the person who betrayed us than it does about us. Aging has brought me a sense of peace, an acceptance that while trust may be fragile, it is also resilient. 6. The impermanence of friendships. Just as family relationships can change, so too do friendships. In my younger years, I believed that the friendships I made would last forever. But now, looking back, I can see that many of the people I once held close were only meant to be in my life for a season. Friendships, like everything else, are subject to the changes of time. People grow, circumstances shift, and sometimes the connection that once felt so strong begins to fade. As I entered my 50s and 60s, I noticed that many of the friendships I had invested in began to dissolve. Some friends moved away, both physically and emotionally. Others simply drifted apart as our lives took different paths. But the most painful losses were the friendships that ended in betrayal, those moments when trust was broken in ways that could not be repaired. I remember one friendship that spanned decades, only to end in a bitter argument that revealed just how much resentment had been building beneath the surface. For years, I had overlooked the small signs that our friendship was unbalanced. I was always the one making the effort, while my friends seemed to take our bond for granted. When the friendship finally ended, I realized just how long I had been holding on to something that no longer brought me joy. At 80, I've come to understand that it's okay to let go of friendships that no longer serve us. Holding on to them out of obligation or nostalgia only leads to resentment. Now, I cherish the few close friendships that have stood the test of time, relationships built on mutual trust, respect, and a shared history. These are the friendships that matter most. 7. Trust in romantic relationships. Trust in romantic relationships can be one of the most challenging and rewarding aspects of life. Love, after all, is built on vulnerability. The willingness to open our hearts to another person and trust them with our most intimate selves. But love, as I have learned, also brings the risk of betrayal, and when trust is broken in a romantic relationship, the pain can be overwhelming. My first marriage ended in divorce, a painful chapter in my life that forced me to confront the reality that love and trust do not always go hand in hand. We loved each other deeply at the beginning, but as time went on, misunderstandings, unmet expectations, and broken promises eroded the trust we had built. It was a harsh lesson, one that shaped my understanding of love in profound ways. In my later years, I found love again, but this time I approached it with a deeper sense of awareness. I understood that trust was not something I could take for granted. It had to be earned day by day. This relationship has brought me great joy, reminding me that while trust can be broken, it can also be rebuilt with patience, honesty, and commitment. 8. The importance of self-reliance. Perhaps the greatest lesson I've learned about trust is the importance of trusting myself. For much of my life, I placed my trust in others, family, friends, romantic partners, often without question. I believed that my happiness and security depended on the people around me. But as I've grown older, I've come to realize that the one person I can always rely on is myself. Self-reliance doesn't mean shutting others out or refusing to trust. It means recognizing that ultimately we are responsible for our own well-being. It means trusting our instincts, setting boundaries, and making decisions that align with our values. At 80, I no longer look to others for validation or security. I've learned that true security comes from within, the knowledge that I have the strength and resilience to face whatever life throws my way. 9. Forgiveness and moving forward. One of the most challenging aspects of broken trust is learning to forgive. For many years, I believed that forgiveness meant letting someone who had hurt me back into my life, that it meant forgetting the pain they caused and pretending that everything was okay. But as I've grown older, I've learned that forgiveness is not about the other person, it's about me. Forgiveness doesn't mean condoning someone's actions or allowing them to hurt us again. It means letting go of the anger, the resentment, and the pain. It means freeing ourselves from the burden of carrying that hurt. In my later years, I've learned that forgiveness is a gift I give to myself, not to the person who betrayed me. It allows me to move forward with my life, unburdened by the weight of past betrayals. 10. The quiet comfort of acceptance. As I reflect on my life, I find comfort in the acceptance that not everyone is trustworthy. And that's okay. I no longer hold on to unrealistic expectations of others, nor do I place my happiness in their hands. I've learned to cherish the relationships that are built on mutual trust and respect, and I've learned to let go of those that are not. At 80, I walk through life with a quiet comfort, knowing that trust is fragile, but that I can trust myself to navigate life's complexities with grace and resilience. Through the disappointments and betrayals, I have learned to protect my heart, set boundaries, and trust in my own strength. Conclusion: the wisdom of trust. At 80, I carry with me the wisdom of trust, a wisdom earned through years of experience, both joyful and painful. I've learned that trust is not something to be given lightly, but something to be cultivated and protected. I've learned that people, even those we love, are fallible, and sometimes they will let us down. But I've also learned that trust, when nurtured with care and respect, can be one of the most beautiful and sustaining forces in life. Trust begins with ourselves, with our ability to set boundaries, forgive, and move forward. It is through trusting ourselves that we find the strength to engage in meaningful relationships with others, knowing that while trust may be fragile, it is also the foundation of love, connection, and belonging. At 80, I no longer see trust as something to be feared or avoided. Instead, I embrace it with open eyes and an open heart, knowing that while it may be tested, it is also the key to living a life of deep connection and fulfillment. Thank you for watching the entire video. If you find these stories inspiring and motivating, please comment 1. If not, comment 0. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thank you for your valuable time.